What is up, guys? In this video, I'm going to be breaking down the most profitable sports and leagues that you can bet on, okay? Like, as a sports bettor, you want to make as much money as possible. So a lot of people like to bet on the popular sports like the NFL, but are they actually the most lucrative sports you can bet on? And the answer is no. NFL is not the most profitable sport you can bet on. 100% no. So in this video, I'm basically going to break down what are the most profitable sports and leagues. Now, I do want to be clear about a couple things. First of all, I bet on a bunch of different sports, right? If I can get an edge betting on baseball, I'll bet on baseball. For example, I just locked in Will Smith to get a double at plus 280. This play was on the OddsJam positive EV tool, which basically just scans the millions of odds across books to point out line discrepancies, point out value. You can see FanDuel is giving you a way better price than all the other books. However, 2 seconds later, I locked in a bet on Toledo, a college football play. So long story short, another play with really good value. So long story short, I bet on a bunch of different sports. However, as a sharp bettor, there are sports that are much more profitable than others. And the point of this video is to kind of run through which sports and leagues are best so you can kind of focus on them and maximize your profits. So by far the best sport that you can bet on, if I could only pick one, I would pick basketball. And it's for a few different reasons, specifically the NBA. The NBA is my most profitable league. I'm up over $200,000 betting on the NBA. Overall, all time, this verified bet tracker I use is called Pickett Sports. It basically reads in all your plays from the sports books, shows you your profit and loss, stuff like that. It's really good. Obviously, you want to track your bets. But why is the NBA the most profitable sport you can bet on? A few reasons. First of all, there's more games, right? More games means more surface area for the books to cover, more opportunity, right? There's 82 games in the NBA regular season, only 17 for the NFL. So let's just say you have just a 1% ROI on your NFL bets. Over the course of a season, you're getting a 17% ROI, whereas over the course of an NBA regular season, there's 82 games in the regular season, you're getting an 82% ROI. So quantity of games is really important, right? Like in football, you basically just have games on Sunday. So even if you have a 5% ROI over the course of a month, 4 weeks in a month, that's a 20% ROI. However, for the NBA, if you're betting every single day on basketball and you can get a 5% ROI over the course of a month, that's an 150% ROI, right? So long story short, basketball quantity of games is important. It also makes it harder for sportsbooks to manage their lines. So as a simple example, if you think about Thursday night football, there's only one NFL game going on. It's super easy for sportsbooks and their traders to watch their NFL lines like a hawk and make sure they're not out of sync, there's not a lot of line discrepancies, arbitrage, or EV bets. Compare that to an NBA slate of 12 games when there's 6 games going on at the same time, lines are flying around, there's a higher probability that the sportsbooks, slip up and offer plays with an edge when more games are going on. So the second reason betting on the NBA is amazing is line movement. Line movement is bigger for the NBA compared to any other sport. So I'll give you a simple example, right? NBA teams, you have 5 players on the court. If Steph Curry is ruled out in a game, if he takes a rest day, every other player on the Warriors, their line needs to change. On top of the money line, the point spread, the total, those need to change. Obviously, if Steph Curry is ruled out, the Warriors' best player, the Warriors could move from being minus 200 to plus 150. That could lead to some insane line movement. But what I was trying to say is, if Steph Curry is ruled out, that also affects every other player, their prop lines. For example, if Steph Curry is ruled out, Jimmy Butler's probably going to be scoring more, taking more shots, so his points line needs to move. Same thing with Draymond Green. So every player is super important in the NBA, and whenever a player's ruled out or official lineups come out, there's huge line movement. So you'll often see, especially in the NBA, OddsJam users able to hit arbitrage bets for $100, $500 risk-free profit. Arbitrage is by far it's best in the NBA. Arbitrage is when two sports books, in this case it was ProfitX and Novig, which are two peer-to-peer betting exchanges that have no max limits. But you can see this guy was able to bet the over on one book, the under on a different book, and because these two books were so out of sync after a lineup change, he was able to make over $500 risk-free just day trading the sports books. You don't really see that in baseball, right? If Ohtani is ruled out, Dodgers money line will change slightly because Ohtani's the GOAT, but it's not gonna move from -200 to +150. The Dodgers are still a stacked team with Mookie Betts, Will Smith. Also, if Ohtani is ruled out, that doesn't really affect Mookie Betts. He's gonna have the same odds to go over under 1.5 bases approximately. So the final thing that's amazing about the NBA is live in-game betting. So live betting is super profitable with players getting subbed in and out, foul trouble, stuff like that. Live in-game betting for the NBA is super profitable. These books can barely manage their odds pre-match. So live in-game NBA betting, EV, middles, arbitrage, those are the three main sharp profitable betting strategies you should learn. It's amazing for the NBA. The NBA is by far the best sport to bet on. Now you may be thinking like, okay, NBA is the best, league, I guess technically to bet on. What about college basketball? College basketball is great as well. College basketball is better than, college football. However, in college, typically there's less prop markets available. A lot of the opportunity in the NBA is because books have so many prop markets. There's huge discrepancies. Player points, player rebounds, steals plus blocks, PRAs, points plus rebounds. Like the NBA has more betting markets, and I said this earlier, but more markets, more surface area for the books to cover means more opportunity for the books to screw up and offer bets with an edge. So that's one of the reasons why NBA is better than college sports. There's just more markets available in pro ball versus, college ball. But anyways, basketball, best sport to bet on. Without further ado, let's get into the second best sport. So my second most profitable sport is the NFL. The NFL is great, football is great. That's the second best sport. NFL is better than college for basically the same reasons I explained for pro basketball being better than college basketball. There's more prop markets for the NFL. A lot of states don't even offer, college football player props. So long story short, like more markets, more surface area for the books to cover, more opportunity. But there are some things that are amazing about football. First of all, there are more prop markets for a football game, for an NFL game, compared to any other sport, right? You have defense, tackles, assists, all these different markets you can bet on. So more markets means it's harder for the sportsbooks to manage their lines, right? That's kind of the key of all of this. So one NFL game is better than one NBA game. What really sucks about, the NFL is, again, just there's a lot less games. However, if I had to pick, you can only bet on one game today, and you give me an NFL game or an NBA game, any day of the week, I'm taking the NFL game. Similar to the NBA, there's really good live betting opportunities, live middle bets, for example, in the NFL. So a middle bet is pretty simple. When two books get way out of sync, you can bet the under on one book, the over on a different book to kind of have this opportunity, this window where you can win both bets. So there's a lot of great live betting opportunities in football. There's a ton of prop markets, and also correlation is most exploitable for football. So this mainly applies to Prize Picks and these fixed payout DFS platforms. So the way that Prize Picks works is, any 4-pick entry, you get a 10x payout. You take a player to go over or under, it doesn't matter. You get the same payout regardless. So what you can do when betting on football is stack quarterbacks and their main wide receiver, their main target, to both go over. So for example, for the Penn State game, I took Drew Aller over, Tyler Warren over. This was a play from last year. Obviously, Warren is a large percentage of Aller's line. So if Aller balls out and throws for 300 yards, there's a very good chance that Tyler Warren is main target went over as well. These two plays are positively correlated. So correlation is much stronger in the NFL and much more exploitable, especially on Prize Picks and other DFS apps compared to any other sport. What's really powerful about sports betting is, in general, you're betting on games that day, right? Because a lot of people will look at my ROI sports betting and they'll say, hey, you have like a 10%, 15% ROI on some of these sports. Why don't you just put your money in the stock market? The S&P 500 returns about 10% a year. And it's like, well, in the NBA, if I have a 5% ROI and I'm betting on games every single day, it just compounds very quickly, which is why your bankroll can grow super quickly as a sharp bettor. So that's really the power of sports betting. And in the NFL, there's less games, so you're gonna compound less quickly. And even if you can get a higher ROI on your football bets compared to basketball bets, you're still gonna make more money betting on basketball because you're just betting on basketball more days of the week. So it's gonna compound quicker. So the third best sport to bet on is baseball. There's really not much opportunity. Most books don't even offer college baseball. But for MLB, there's some pros and there's some cons. The main pro, unsurprisingly, is just how many games there are. 162 games in the regular season. More games, more surface area for the books to cover, more opportunity. The downside with baseball is there's just not as many prop markets as the NBA and the NFL, and there's not much line movement. The only thing that really does move MLB lines is if a starting pitcher ends up getting replaced last minute. So if you have some absolute stud on the mound, like, Skubal, and whatever, he gets injured in practice, he gets replaced with some scrub for the Tigers, that will change things around. The money line will actually move in a pretty significant way, as well as the opposing hitter batter props, but that doesn't happen that often. The fourth best sport to bet on is NHL hockey. Just like baseball, there's really not much college hockey. Hockey is decent, similar to baseball. There's a fair amount of games in the NHL, it's not like there's 17 games like the NFL, but similar to baseball, there's not a ton of prop markets. Also in the NHL, there's just not a ton of line movement. There's not as much scoring. So middles, right? We were talking about earlier middle betting on the NFL, betting Joe Burrow over 240, under 280 on a different book. You're not really going to get that in the NHL. There's not as much scoring. So we've gone through 4 sports so far. Best sport, basketball, then football, then baseball, then hockey. That's what the data shows. That's what my net profit after a sample size of tens of thousands of bets shows. But there's still more sports to go through. So next I wanted to cover tennis. Tennis is actually an awesome sport to bet on, okay? Tennis is awesome. First of all, one-on-one sports like tennis and UFC often have the most line movement, right? One-on-one. So basically, if something happens to one player, if his wrist gets hurt or something like that, or if he's misses weight in the UFC. There's tons of things that move around lines, but one-on-one sports have a ton of line movement. It is very common to see a tennis player go from being a minus 300 favorite to a minus 150 favorite within the span of just a couple hours of sharp action moving the line. One-on-one sports have more line movement because you only need to focus on one player, their performance, stuff like that. Whereas in a team sport, again, you typically don't see, unless there's major injuries, much line movement in the NFL from where a line opens to where the line closes. If the Vikings open as minus 200 favorites, typically they're going to close around minus 200. And another plus of tennis is it's just not as popular of a sport to bet on. So sports books don't watch their lines as closely. If you think about the NFL on a Sunday, sports books, their traders, their employees are watching NFL lines like a hawk. They're trying to, at least. Whereas in tennis, these random ATP, WTA tournaments, typically you can find some pretty juicy, some pretty big line discrepancies. So my ROI in tennis is actually very good compared to a lot of other sports. There's big line discrepancies. and you can make some good money. But the problem with tennis is it's not as active of a betting market. It's not as liquid. There's not as many prop markets. Most sports books will take lower max betting limits on tennis compared to the NFL or NBA. So you may be surprised that soccer hasn't shown up yet. I mean, obviously throughout Europe, Latin America, soccer's the most popular sport to bet on, but in the US, there's not a ton of prop betting markets. And similar to hockey, right, there's just not as much scoring, so live in-game betting, things like arbitrage betting, they're just not as profitable, right? It's not as exploitable of a sport. So you can see I've absolutely made money betting on soccer, but the volume, my ability to get down profitable soccer bets compared to NBA is super different. Also in the US, soccer in general has lower betting limits. But anyways, there is a long tail of other sports, right? There's tons of other leagues, stuff like that. A lot of them on this bet tracker picket fall into the other category. So I'll give you an example of one sport I now bet on every single day is Esports, CS2, League of Legends, basically every single day. Now, not a ton of books do Esports. FanDuel, DraftKings don't have Esports, but Prize Picks, Underdog, Sleeper, a bunch of other books do, and there are massive line discrepancies. It is a super inefficient market. These books can barely manage their lines. You'll often see esports players, line discrepancies, that you would never see in the NBA. It's crazy. Another benefit of esports is some days there's hundreds of games between CS2, League of Legends, all these different leagues, Valorant. There are just so many professional esports matches you can bet on. Again, more games, more surface area, more opportunity for these books to slip up. Correlation is also exploitable in esports. It's not as profitable as football correlation, which we went through earlier, but you can make money on correlation on Prize Picks. I've actually made some full-length videos about esports correlation. But again, it's just such an inefficient market, massive line discrepancies, which is obviously a good thing for sports bettors. But regardless, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know any questions, comments, what other videos you want to see. I love making sports betting content. And again, thanks so much for your time, guys.